So how do we learn things of an artistically creative nature? And how do we teach others to use the creative gifts that they have been given? That is what we're going to get into in this video. And for a change, we will be talking with someone who I believe will have some practical thoughts on just that. I'm excited to welcome to our channel our middle child and our fantastically wonderful baby girl, Sydney West. And no, I'm not at all biased.
Hey, everybody.
So let me give a bit of background on Sydney before we move on. Since she was a little girl, she very much, like her sister and her brother, has always been motivated to create in an artistic manner. For our kids, I believe that predisposition to artistic creativity was partially due to the environment of creativity in our home, a subject we will be discussing more in upcoming videos. But most of it is because she was created by God to create. She was created to create in a very specific way. Now, Sydney has always gravitated to music. She took piano lessons as a very young child and again as a teenager. And at that point, she didn't really want to pursue music in any real occupational way. But some things happened, and God gave her a path that she didn't expect in college. And she switched her major to commercial music, where she earned a degree in film scoring and followed that up with a master's in music education. Immediately after she finished her master's degree, she joined a university as an adjunct professor for commercial music in both a residential and online capacity. And as of recording of this video, she is about to begin her 4th year as a professor. Sydney also has other music education endeavors that include educating non-collegiate adults and high school students in commercial music. Sydney is a truly wonderful singer and a member of a professional choir in our hometown. Alongside her wonderful husband, Joe, she actively supports and participates on the worship team at their church. And Sydney still does film scoring, orchestration, engraving, songwriting, mix engineering, mastering, and producing in her copious free time. Obviously, there is so much more that makes Sydney, well, Sydney. But for the purpose of our discussion, this part of who she is pertains to the subject at hand. So, Sydney, is there anything you would like to share before we get started?
Yeah, I'm just glad to be here today. I'm glad to be able to talk about something that I'm very passionate about. Just talking about how music can be not only a passion in your life, but also a creative endeavor, a career endeavor for some of us. But for some, it's just a support to everything else that we do in life. And so I'm glad to be able to talk about that today.
Well, again, we are so excited to have you on to talk about creative education, specifically music education, from your perspective. As a professor and educator of creative skills and ideas, you have developed your own thoughts on education, a teaching philosophy. You shared that with me, and it includes 5 points: communication, collaboration, technique, technology, and another additional secret point. We're going to break these points up into individual episodes, and we'll also have a final long-form video with all of the points combined and with that final secret 5th point included. I'll pop a card and a link in the description for the playlist of videos in this series right here on YouTube. If you watch or listen on a different platform, you'll have to do a little search for it yourself. Okay, enough of the introduction. Let's get into this. Your first point concerns something that is vital to every creative endeavor and for the passing on of information in order to educate others: communication. We know that it is important, but what is it about communication that you have to get right to do the work of educating? And also, what do you see as the biggest challenges in communication in creative education today?
Yeah, so communication in my teaching philosophy really has 2 sides to it, right? Communicating from my perspective as the one that's sharing information, and then also modeling or demonstrating to students how they can communicate in their future career, but not just in the future, right now, as they're learning. How do they communicate needs, things like that? So I'm going to start with the first side of that, which is how I communicate, and then I'll go to the second part of that. So for me, an educator, really all I am is somebody that's paid to communicate at a very high level, right? I have information that I'm sharing, and I'm doing it in a way that's hopefully accepted by my students, and can be broken down into the different ways that they learn. And so when I'm communicating, I try to really meet the needs of my students, not just sharing information, but also presenting it in different ways. So having it be with the different learning models of visual education, verbal education, having kinesthetic education, which is, touch, right? Being able to actually interact with the information, and really trying to bring that into whether I'm doing a lecture on a topic or I'm sitting and having a conversation on a topic. I try to make information as much as possible, right? Sometimes I can't literally give them information in a physical format for them to interact with. But when I'm teaching a technology, really communicating the information about the technology, showing the technology, and then demonstrating and asking for follow-up on the student side of things. That's been a huge thing in the way that I teach, of making sure that students have opportunities to do all three things. On the other side, with students, demonstrating or really modeling that communication pattern, not just in making sure that there's time to ask questions and all of those things. That's kind of baseline of when you're teaching something to someone else. You want to make sure that they feel comfortable and open to ask questions, to ask for more information, for re-clarification on issues, things like that. That's kind of a baseline. But what I really strive for in conversation with my students, again, whether I'm lecturing or in a more one-on-one setting, I really try to make sure that students, they not only see that I know information, but they might see how I model that, and they might be able to take that and reiterate that information again to somebody else. I like to tell my students, if you are if somebody comes up to you and asks you about this topic, would you be able to walk them through this, right? Would you be able to take them step by step through this? And if you aren't, then we need to go over this again. We need to shape this or refocus on a different aspect of this, because communication is so important of as far as conveying information, and the way that we do it is very important. And so really try to set that up well for not just the point of continuing information or continuing that educational pursuit of sharing the wealth of information that we have in our life with other people, but also just understanding fundamentally within our own being what that information means. I think that there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of things that we see on, social media, on YouTube, on just anywhere we go on the internet. We're looking for information, and we will find information. But understanding how to ask the right questions to really validate that information, to find the truth that might be hiding behind some of the information that we see, and really being able to seek that truth. And that's kind of a theme of my teaching philosophy of being able to help students find the truth in what their endeavor is. As far as the second question that you asked was, what are some of the challenges that we have in communication? Well, it kind of ties to what I just said. One of the challenges that I have with students, and I've run into a lot with my students that are, 18, in their 20s, things like that, kind of in a generation where they grew up in this age of mass and excess information, and they've never known the world without just instant access to information. What I've noticed is it almost degrades the quality of time that they would want to commit to learning. And it's not an intentional degradation of this. It's more of a it's almost a training that's happening, right? The more time you spend with your phone in your hand or in front of your computer, in front of your TV, the more you train your mind, to get really used to that. So one of the biggest hurdles that I've had to really jump over as far as communicating with my students has been uh, figuring out ways to make the information not only necessary to them, right, to kind of fight the noise of everything else, but to also get them asking questions, those clarifying questions for validity, for really just ruling out, what is good for me, what is bad for me, what's true, what is untrue. How do I weigh those things against themselves, and find really the weight of what that would be in my own career. So I think with communication, it's yes, it's communicating information. We all know, like, when we sit down and somebody says they're going to teach us something, right? They're going to give us information. They're going to communicate something to us. But as we'll get into in one of my other points with collaboration, communication is not just about sharing information. It's about sharing ideas. It's about sharing how that information actually impacts your life, not just sharing the numbers of something or the scientific facts about something, right? I can start talking about condenser microphones and start talking about how it relates to electricity and all of these things, and I can get into the scientific facts, and really go down the rabbit hole. But at the end of the day, does that communication actually bring fruit to that student's life as far as what they're actually going to do with that information? Now, absolutely, I think it's important to know how a microphone works, if you're going to be using them. But really, it's about reading the room, right? Reading your students. One of the biggest things that I've tried to implement, especially in classroom settings, has been asking my students questions. Not asking them if they have questions, but asking them questions has been a really beneficial thing, because we're receiving information all the time. So I think it's nice to have opportunities to output information and to kind of almost hear if you sound a little silly, or not, and have that feedback from somebody that's a safe person to communicate with. So that's a huge thing for me. I like to ask background questions about my students, know who they are, know what they do, know what their goals are. But I also like to ask them questions about the content I'm presenting. What do you think about this? How does this apply to your career? Where do you see yourself using this? And seeing what conversations can start from there. So
That's great. One of the things that a couple of the things that you said that kind of piqued my thoughts was, you talk about communicating the things that you've learned back as a student, even as an educator, I guess. The more times we get to say the thing, the more times we get to repeat the process to someone else, it ingrains in a different way than just thinking about it or reading in a book or in your notes or whatever, as you've been taught a thing. But to actually do the thing is imperative sometimes to learn it, but to speak it back to somebody else, to teach someone else, creates an opportunity for you to use a different part of your brain that integrates that information in a different way, because you're now thinking, how do I articulate this thing that I've done that I was taught one way, but I kind of do it a slightly different way. And but I want to get the general thing to this person. And I think that gives you an opportunity as the person that's regurgitating the information to learn it in a deeper, more kind of structural way. It becomes part of the framework of your thoughts more, because you have spent the time to think about it in a way that would help others to understand it. So I think that's a big part of it for me, at least. And
I go back to Genesis 1 with this information, and it says that when God was creating, he didn't just think something into existence. He could have, but he spoke into existence. And I think that there's a powerful imagery that I often think about in my own life, personally, when I'm teaching, whatever it is. But speaking things out loud, and speaking, speaking out loud your plans for, I don't know, making a video, and speaking out loud your ideas to nobody, just to say it out loud, or saying it to somebody else. It really solidifies, your own thoughts on it. And, it can kind of show you where even in your own self, you see the errors of your thought processes or your patterns that you're in. But speaking it out loud to somebody else is one of the most powerful ways to grow. I mean, there's no growth without movement. And I think one of the best ways to move, toward that growth is to start talking about it. Because the more we hide in our, I'll do it later, the more we hide in our, and don't even know that we're hiding in it, but the more we do that, the more we don't talk about it, the easier it is to just stay in the same spot. So I do think that that's a great example would be looking at, what was the first thing that God did when he wanted us to be around. He wanted us to be a part of his creation. Well, he spoke, so that's something that I think about when I'm talking to my students.
Yeah. It's interesting. God, this isn't specifically about, well, it kind of is, but God spoke into existence a lot of things, but he constructed man with his own hands. And then there is a psalm, and I can't remember which one it is, but the translation, it basically said, "You gave me ears to hear" is the English translation, but the Hebrew, it goes back to that thought of forming out of the dust, building with clay, and instead of saying "You gave me ears to hear," it basically says, "You dug out my ears so that I could hear." It goes back to that thought of that creation, that creative thing that God did, that he actually is the one that opens our ears to hear his word. And he also opens our ears to hear truth from others. He opens our ears to hear the important information that is given to us, whether it's sitting under the teaching of the word or in a classroom setting. Or one of the things you talked about was to asking your students questions, about them, bringing them out. I think that the biggest part of communication that the majority of us get wrong, because we're self-centered and egotistical by nature. Even the most pure of heart of us still has that capacity in them, is that we tend to think and want to talk about ourselves and not communicate by listening to others.
Yeah.
That's the other half of communication. It is talking, it is expressing thoughts and ideas, but it's also sitting back and listening to the thoughts and ideas of others and using that in a way to frame your thoughts and ideas better, and also to allow yourself, and this is something we really don't do, you can look at our politics and see it happening every day, listening with the expectation that maybe your opinion will change. Maybe your thoughts about a thing will change, because in education, and you you have told me stories, so I know, there are all these people that come in thinking they know. They already know all they need to know. In your case, and because I have this a similar background, I didn't teach, but I went through a commercial music kind of thing. And everybody thinks that they're going to write the next best whatever, or they're already a great producer, or they're already a great mixer because they've used Fruity Loops or whatever, and I'm sure the same thing can be said for writers and guys, filmmakers. Guy makes a film on his iPhone, he thinks he's great, whatever, but they come in with ears that have not been opened to hear, because then they get met with reality, and I think that's part of the communication that you do, that is important to say the things that these students need to hear. But also for them, they need to be open to the part of communication in that moment that they need to focus on, which is the listening part.
Yeah.
And I think that is a vital part. Without listening, whether it's in communicating thoughts and ideas about in your specific case, commercial music, or life things, like how often do we sit and talk with somebody and they're pouring out their heart and we're thinking about the thing we're going to say instead of listening and engaging with that active listening to not just hear the words, but to embrace the words in a way that will allow you in the end to hopefully minister to them, to be a part of their lives in a deeper way. And that part of communication obviously is a little different in relationships than it is in education, but I think it's still an imperative part.
Oh, it is, absolutely. I tell my students listening with intentionality as opposed to an agenda is always a superior form of listening, because if you're listening with an agenda of I'm going to get this out of this class, or I'm listening with the agenda of I need to say this to this person at the core relational level, or I'm listening to my client, but I'm not really listening because I know what they're saying isn't lining up. I work with filmmakers; they're not musicians, and so at least not all of them, but most of the ones I've worked with are not musicians. And if I listen to them, knowing in my mind that they're going to say some things that are going to need follow-up questions more than likely, and I don't give them the benefit of the doubt, often I miss things. I've done that before. I've missed things because I had a set of questions and agenda going in, and I missed some key details or some emotional impact that I could have included in what I was doing, because I already had a preset mental state before entering into a conversation about the project that we're doing or a conversation I have with a student. If I put my conception of that student on them before they start speaking to me, and I don't really allow them to expand beyond my preconceived, this is how they sit in my class and it looks like they're playing Minecraft during, my lecture, and I apply that to them, I may miss out on the fact that they are an exceptional student and that they focus in a different way. Right. And hopefully they're not playing Minecraft in my class. But yeah, so I think that, listening with intentionality rather than having a plan or an agenda, being prepared is a very good thing. But preparing to a point where it leaves no room for interaction, different interpretation, and learning on your own part is really the first step to not being asked to collaborate again. It's kind of that first step toward that. And that collaboration is obviously our next point, but they're so intertwined with each other, communication and collaboration. So
for sure. Well, see, communication is a vital part of each and every part of our lives. And when it comes to passing along our thoughts and ideas to help others grow their creative skills, talents, and abilities, it is a truly imperative part of the process. Good communication is the biggest key to understanding. And understanding is what education is all about. Not just knowing information, but understanding at a foundational level the things that we do in our creative endeavors. So when we have the opportunity to instruct others to communicate our understanding of the things we do, let's work hard to do that thing well as we go, create, and be a blessing. You can support our channel by subscribing, hitting that bell icon to get notified when new content comes out, and liking our videos. If you'd like to consider supporting our team financially, there's a link in the video description with more details. Those things will help our channel for sure, but if you do nothing else, please spend some time in the comments of our videos encouraging one another to create, to help others create, and to help grow that creative nature within us all. Oh, and you can check out these videos too. Thanks. We'll see you again soon.